Hello and welcome to this Top 100 Virtual Roundtable. My name is Catherine and I'm one of the Content and Community Managers here within the Business of Data team at Crinium. It's wonderful to have you joining us today. This event will feature some of the fantastic data and analytics leaders featured within our global Top 100 Innovators in Data Analytics list. Each year we compile this list to celebrate the truly great minds Crinium has the pleasure to work with. Across the next hour, we'll delve into the topics and content which has been discussed, researched and explored in our wider Business of Data content, from our State of the Data Analytics 2020 report through to the themes we touch upon in our weekly podcast. We'd love to hear from you as well, so be sure to leave your thoughts, comments and questions, and our thought leaders will be sure to get back to you. For now, let's dive in. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the first of our Top 100 virtual roundtables. Joining me today are 5 of the Top 100 executives from across North America. Hello everyone, and can I be the first to say a huge congratulations on being placed within the Top 100 Global Innovators in Data Analytics. Now, I'm going to pass over to you guys shortly to introduce yourselves, but what I'm going to ask you to do is kick off by answering our ice-breaking question, which is, what is the biggest data and analytics lesson you've learned during the pandemic? Dante, I'm going to go to you first. If you could introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Dante. I am the Chief Data Analytics Officer in Chubb Insurance for Latin American markets. One of the biggest challenges during this pandemic, it's obviously the demand that it's been increasing a lot, and maybe the thing that we are not absolutely ready for this shift into a really data-driven mindset from the people that wants to answer a lot of questions. So I will say that that's primarily our biggest challenge on this COVID stage right now.
Fantastic, thanks so much. Lax, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. This is Lax Mayathan. I'm head of the data science department at Regions Bank. So one of the key challenges that we are facing today, in my mind, is it's completely unforeseen situation. We've seen downturns previously affecting kind of the overall market and stuff. Now, there are segments which are affected more than others, especially if you take small business. So they are more affected. Some of the bigger corporations, the stock market seems to be doing good. The housing seems to be doing good. So there are portions of areas which are doing good, portions which are not doing good. So it's been interesting how we kind of update and do things specifically using data analytics when we are data driven.
Fantastic. Morgan, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us what the big challenge has been for you.
Hi, I'm Morgan Templer, and I'm the Vice President of Data Management at HM Health Solutions, a division of Highmark Health. We have, being an integrated healthcare system, I think the biggest challenge that we've had this year is really getting access to our data. We have so much information and we've had so much opportunity to utilize that information in advanced analytics in this response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And getting access to that information has absolutely been the number one challenge that we faced this year.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Scott Zoldi, Chief Analytics Officer at FICO. For us, one of the challenges is anticipating change. We're through the pandemic at this point, and where we are with the pandemic is understanding what are the next 3 to 6 months going to look like for the models that we develop. And so one of the things that we're focused on very strongly is focusing on what can we anticipate that will happen in the economy for these models that we're developing, whether they're credit risk models, fraud models, or compliance models, and building those models such that they are as robust as possible to possible scenarios of change. So we're inventorying the different ways that the economy and the market may be changing, building models that are more robust to those changes so that these models that we depend upon can continue to be resilient in these times of change. And that's one of the major focuses, which combines a little bit of art with science and also a little bit of fortune telling.
Last but not least, Krishna.
Hello, Krishna Charith, Chief Data Officer for Bristol Myers Squibb. being in biopharma during these COVID times, I think the biggest challenge that we have is how do we ensure that the healthcare data that could really power cures and vaccines for the pandemic that we are facing, how do we make sure that as a society, as a company, as well as a healthcare ecosystem, we have the right data available to the research community to accelerate the cure and vaccines for it. So that's by far the biggest challenge that we chief data officers across the healthcare ecosystem is facing. And at Bristol Myers Squibb, we are facing our own microcosm of it in two ways. One, we just before COVID completed the acquisition of Celgene. So how do we create an integrated data fabric for the combined company? Second, for the broad portfolio of medicines that we have the potential to bring to our patients, how do we make sure that the data underpinning for that from a clinical research, development, supply chain, manufacturing, and bringing those medicines to patients are at its optimum best. So those are the big challenges facing, one at the societal level, one at the healthcare ecosystem level, and one at the company level.
Brilliant. Thank you and welcome. Now, if you are happening to be watching us on LinkedIn, do pop comments in. Let us know where you're joining us from. It's great to have you watching. And if you are watching on the website as well, feel free to use the chat feature and get involved as well. That's great to have you here. So let's dive into our first topic area. All about it. Now, according to some research that we did in our recent 2020 State of DNA US-based report, 75% of data analytics leaders say demand for data in their organization has risen because of COVID-19. So my first question for you all is, how have you seen the demand for data increase this year within your own organizations and your own experiences? Morgan, I'm going to come to you first for that one.
I'd be happy to answer that. I think that as I mentioned, really getting access to our data has been one of the biggest challenges, not because we didn't have the information, but because it was in antiquated systems and it was buried in different databases throughout our ecosystem. And as we really look at the demand that we've had, we've needed to be able to pull that data to do the modeling that has allowed us to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and both from a frontline provider perspective, as well as from a healthcare payer perspective. And we do support quite a few payers. So has been very important and very challenging. And what we've really focused on as we've come through this, really the lessons learned that we've identified is that we needed to focus on our basics. We needed to get our foundation stronger. We needed to take another look at that infrastructure that we run on every day and stop saying because it ain't broke, don't fix it. We really needed to fix it. We really need to go forward in our future roadmap and not just make it up to today's standard, but really make sure that our data and analytics foundation is ready for the next unexpected and the next thing that we aren't predicting or that we don't know about.
Absolutely. And already we're 5 minutes into this conversation and we've already had so much mention of anticipating change and being ready for the future and actually taking the lessons that we've learned and using that directly in the roadmap for the future. So Krishna, how about you? How has the demand for data increased, decreased? How have you seen it in recent months?
I think I would answer it in two ways. One, there is certain aspect that has increased demand. That is true because of this workforce going remote in a global basis across the company has meant that the digital underpinning of the company, which includes data technologies, have to meet the demands of a global workforce that is now remote. When I say workforce, that is not just the employees of the company, but it's the extended third-party network. So how do we make sure that there is a frictionless movement of data and digital that continues to maintain the important focus of the company and the work of the company? So that has really forced us to reimagine aspects of our data agenda along with the digital agenda. So that is one thread. Second is really, I would say, a continuation of theme that was true pre-COVID, is how do we make sure that data is no more a barrier for scientific innovation, especially in our context. Whether we talk about real world data or healthcare data broadly, how do we make sure that these are available for accelerating the discovery of medicines and accelerating clinical trials continue to be a focus area. The third aspect that is really coming into sharper focus, even greater, is how do we make sure that the trust and transparency around the use of data becomes strong, a priority, and is reinforced, especially in a world which has gone increasingly digital in a COVID setting. And some of this will become the new continuation of the new normal, if you will, coming out of COVID-19. How do we make sure that trust and transparency of the data interchange in the digital ecosystem is maintained so that we can continue to make sure that we are able to balance the needs for innovation with risk, privacy, ethics considerations. So I think those are elements that have come to a sharper focus beyond just an insatiable demand for data that I predict will continue to grow multiples in the days to come.
That's brilliant, and there's definitely a lot in there that I want to explore a little bit further in this discussion as well. Scott, heading over to you, demand for data increased with you.
So there's definitely been a demand for data increase. I mean, whether it be more real-time information. So, for example, you can imagine if somebody was extending a loan, understanding where they were 3 months ago may not be as interesting as understanding where they are today from a transaction perspective or from an income perspective. So part of it has been around understanding, what data can we get that's more relevant and different than what's already been available. And, if we can get it in a real-time fashion, that gives us the most accurate and up-to-date view of a customer. That's important. So, we've had this demand for more recent information, more accurate information, more timely information. I think with that said, though, there's also been a focus on more rapid investigation of the data that we already have. So as an example, as information comes in from unemployment numbers or from lending numbers, how quickly can that data be analyzed? How can you make the best determinations from these trends in the data? So I've seen a bigger focus on, examining in very, strong detail the data that's already been there. And then, with this whole new data, there has been a lot of interest in what other sources are available. But with that said, there's also this sort of concern, right, that we don't jump too rapidly to consuming that data in ways that we don't know how best to do, right? So if we don't have experience with an alternate data source, should we really start making very fundamental decisions about customers based on it? So I think it's a very complicated concept. There's definitely, people looking for more recent information to make better decisions. The question is, how best to leverage that information to make those decisions.
Fantastic. Lax, how about you? How have you experienced that demand?
Yeah, so it's been drastically increasing, especially in two areas, I would say. Like one is in the digital space, and the other one is kind of the fraud analytics space. So digital space, like a few events happened recently, which kind of accelerated. Everyone knew that it's kind of going up and stuff, but the few events that happened recently kind of accelerated that quite a bit. Like we couldn't keep most of our branches open. Like people had to go on with appointments to branches. And there are people like who don't even want to go outside their home. So they're trying to access all their bank accounts, make transactions more and more using digital platforms, be it online or mobile applications. So obviously there's been a rise in that. One thing that I would like to specifically point out was even when the stimulus check came out, everyone during that period, like in April, like was logging into their digital accounts to check, like, did they get that stimulus check in their account? And based on the volume of pinging and like based on that volume, several major banks kind of had a droppage in their service during those days. So I'm proud to say, like regions like the service kept on, like we kind of thought about those things. We've been ramping up on our digital service, like we didn't have any droppage. But similarly, in the fraud space, most people forget to think about it, like especially as things go more digital and people are doing things from home. It makes it a lot more easier for some of the people doing fraud. So we are paying a lot more attention kind of in that space to make sure like our customers are not affected based on that. So those are two big areas in my mind.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Dante, how about you? How about that demand?
I will say that this pandemic, it's something that, some sort of exposure of any technical debt that the companies have. So in order to actually keep up with this demand, I will say that the problem fundamentally is that we are pushing out of our comfort zone because the data pipes and the flows and everything was prepared for the normal frequency of distribution of the data. And right now, let's say that because of the uncertainty, people is looking for a different frequency and different volume of data, and the whole ecosystem is not ready for that. So let's say that if we had different strategies in terms of our data lakes and so on, this pandemic has definitely accelerated this process of innovation. So yeah, it's definitely a pressure right now to have all those developments done, to, as some of the comments before, like to have real-time data, not only changing the frequency, but even achieving that real-time data, and also to be able to actually maintain your customer service for this remote now service that we are providing, right? So it's a game changing, all this pandemic, for everything. It's not only about the demand. I will say that the form of the demand and the frequency of the demand and the scope of the demand, that it's been changing.
There we go. I think we've had our first soundbite there. It's certainly been game-changing, to say the least. So there's a couple of things there that I'd love to pick up. Now, Morgan and Krishna, you've both said that you've kind of had to reevaluate foundations and that they need to be stronger. And then Krishna, you said about the kind of this frictionless movement of data, and then I know it was commented about kind of having access. You kind of all mentioned it or lent onto it about the access being there. So what really has this last few months meant for your data strategy? So Morgan, I'm going to come to you first, just purely because you kind of set the tone with saying about the foundations. How have you gone in and looked at the of your data strategy and kind of reevaluated it? And you must have done it so quickly as well.
We did, and we've looked at it in many different perspectives, and we've actually decided that we need a little bit to go back to the basics. Your comment about, I actually wrote down a couple of notes because there were so many good comments, but when Dante, you're talking about technical debt, we had to go back and look at our technical debt and reprioritize and identify what were those things that we really needed to get taken care of right away, that we're going to give better access to the data, because that opening those pipelines, opening up our bandwidth, that has been one of the most key things that we identified that we were hampered by in our responses. And Scott, as you kind of talked about anticipating change, and then a little bit about interoperability, we've just had a new federal regulation around interoperability from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and having that new additional regulatory requirement on top of an already taxed and struggling, bandwidth, because no one expected, like was mentioned, everyone working from home, having to send a global workforce home in one day was just like unheard of and completely unexpected. And then we have this we have to be interoperable, not just internally, but externally. And we have to be able to release more data in a digital channel and make more health data available to individuals so they can manage their own health in a more informed and participatory way. And so there is this fundamental evaluation of our data and what they need to be and where they need to be matured to in order to really provide the experience for our members and our patients that we aspire to, as our mission is a world where everyone embraces health. And so in order to embrace health, you need to be able to have the data in your own hands to be able to make your own decisions and embrace that. So there were so many great themes there that have really resonated with the way we've reevaluated our data strategy, the way we've looked at the fundamentals and really taken it back from, we have these vast data departments. Let's just talk about data movement. Who moves the data? Let's talk about data access. How do we access the data? What are our standard patterns? What should our standard patterns be? How can we eliminate customization and duplication and all of the waste that you have in your data and across your ecosystem? And so it's been very much, a little bit of, they say, get out of your house and start moving. Don't sit and gain your COVID-19. Speaking of the 19 pounds that we might all gain. But it's been the same with our data. We need to get it out and exercise it and understand what it is and get it in better shape and make it more performant for where we need to be and where we want to go.
Absolutely love that. Exercise your data. Now, Dante and Krishna, you both commented on something that I thought was really interesting. You both used the words, putting out of your comfort zone, kind of being forced. COVID-19 really was the perfect storm where things that perhaps were on the horizon or kind of dreams and aspirations suddenly became the forefront. You were now having to deal with it, whether you wanted to or not. How did you navigate that with your teams, especially as most of you, I assume, were remote working, so you were no longer in that office environment where you could really keep morale up, and with the context of this particular topic area, that data is being in greater demand, so the demand is going to be falling on your teams. So Dante, I'll come to you first. How have you helped your teams deal with this demand and increased awareness?
Yeah, I mean, following the topic of data strategy, because this is totally related with data strategy. I mean, it's been how you connect all the components to actually achieve that that demand or that you're trying to provide, and it's basically it was necessary to go and tackle different areas, from data governance to data quality, some lineage analysis that we're pending over there, some data architecture, some also BI and visualization techniques and data science that were on certain projects. So let's say, I will say that the whole plan was changed. The 2020 plan that we did in 19 was absolutely changed. So it's been difficult because the team, it's been feeling the pressure of, I mean, the guidance is not like it used to be, very clear, very specific, time constrained, and right now time is changing all the time. Maybe a project was established for 6 months and now it should be done in 2 months. So yeah, it's a lot of pressure for the teams, especially some of the engineers and developers, changing the back end so we can provide that visualization and information for decision making. So yeah, it's working on a different speed, on a different manner. Let's say that we are indeed applying the agile techniques that we used to try to practice, and now we've been forced to actually apply these agile techniques in order to have, to keep up with this demand and the speed that is required.
Absolutely. I think from theory into reality has been the case for many. I'm going to open it up to the group. How about yourselves? How have you been, dealing with this very big change?
I think the one thing that I would say is, if there's anything that has been reinforced, is the human centricity. I mean, whether it is each of us in our personal lives dealing with the reality that we all face, or as leaders, how do we help the organization move towards balancing the challenges to their personal life with the professional expectations. And then if you bring it back to a data agenda, how do we help the organization perform better by maximizing the capabilities that is available digitally, has really called on us to evaluate the strategy, not just from a digital perspective or data perspective, but a human capital perspective as well. Whether it is looking at to make sure that people have the right collaboration tools, or a frictionless movement of data across the network so that people are able to do their job when and where they want to do it, versus the traditional models of work. It is all of these factors have asked us to take a step back and look at putting the human at the center, whether it is a customer, whether it is the employee, or in our case, the patient, the physician. How do we reimagine some aspects of it where if we look at this kind of a remote, globally remote, digitally connected but physically separated world, I think it is calling on all of us to relook at some of the assumptions. Some of the practical things that we had to do was to help the team prioritize. And how do we ensure that we have the right balance from a work-life perspective in a remote working setting? How do we make sure that the digital infrastructure and the data infrastructure of the company is set up to really continue to in a long-lasting remote workforce mode in a connected ecosystem? All of this have called us to reevaluate some of our priorities as well as some of our strategies in the digital and data space.
Absolutely, and I love that point there where you were saying long lasting as well, because I don't think we're quite over it yet. Lex, go on. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no worries. I was just kind of going to add on to what Krishna said. So to me, there have been some true positives that came out from the pandemic as well. Some of these decisions, which would have taken us like a month to kind of get an agreement across the board and move on, we've been doing it in days now. Basically, we have to kind of quickly move and make most people work in remote. If they'd had that conversation, maybe last year, it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. So there've been a lot of positives as well, whether it is working remote, kind of using more and more agile, as Dante pointed out. So there's been a lot of positives as well to me based on the pandemic.
Absolutely. That's definitely something that I've really enjoyed with a number of conversations that I've been lucky enough to have, is that actually in terms of achieving and moving further in your journey, no matter what that is, if it's digital transformation, AI, whatever, you've managed to do that in an accelerated way, because many of the things that stood in the way have been removed because that demand is there. But also things like companies that would never dream of having a remote workforce suddenly didn't have a choice, and they've been able to test out these new ways of working, removing that opportunity of choice and having things put in their way. Now, I'm going to move the conversation on. I'm conscious of time. Now, Scott, you mentioned right in the beginning about the rapid need for real-time insights and analytics, and that's our next question. So I'm going to come to you first. Where are you on the journey to delivering real-time insights and analytics currently?
So we're pretty far down the journey. One of our lead sort of machine learning capabilities is around fraud detection, and we've been doing it for 30 years. So it's ingrained in our company that we need to be able to make decisions in 30 milliseconds based on transactions that come into these machine learning models. And so, we've designed a lot of our technology to operate in real time, and from that perspective, we have a big head start on a lot of others that are trying to ingest data at scale and with low latency. With that said, though, right? I think we are focusing on doubling down on that, and I think we heard the exercising the data. For me, this entire situation around COVID has really made data first, and what I mean by that is, the data is changing in tremendously subtle ways. And so, part of this real-time insight, outside of real-time decisions, real-time insight is around looking at the data as it comes through. And, as an example, it was referenced how fraud is on the rise. And in fact, things like scams fraud is becoming a very big challenge, and many people are getting taken advantage of during these times. So we are actively focused on, things like autoencoder technologies to look at very small pockets of data, derive insight right away, communicate that to our customers so they can make adjustments to their strategies. And that is something where we're trying to focus on that being a continuous sort of program for us, right? We have an advantage at our company that we see the data of 9,000 banks at once, and there's a humongous amount of this data. But finding very subtle patterns and anticipating how the environment is changing is critically important to us. So, we continue to focus on that more on the large and the big data scale in terms of providing that insight. And so, although we have always had our grounding here, now it's really what's happening in the industry, not just about protecting a customer, but understanding where the industry is moving, how the criminals are moving around, let's say, within the fraud environment, and anticipating that, and then reacting to that through advanced machine learning that can be derived based on these changes.
Brilliant. Now, just to extend that point, then, Lax, coming to you. I know it was kind of you that brought up the fraud topic initially. So, where are you guys on your journey to real-time insights and analytics?
Yeah, so it is extremely important. And as Scott mentioned, especially in the fraud space, you don't have too much time to react. It almost needs to be real time. So it's a very, very important focus from our point. We've made a lot of amazing progress in the last 2 years. One way we kind of been trying to achieve it is we said we need true focus on this one. So we have one of my peers is a head of model platforms. So we said it needs to be thought about very strategically. So even though it's a small team, we kind of created that specifically to focus that the data science work that my group does, it just doesn't stay in-house, but then it is being able to scale and used across in real time. So we have a lot of focus in that space, and we have made a lot of progress. We have multiple data products, which is real time and being used in real time at this point.
Fantastic. Morgan, same question to you.
So I actually really love that you kind of ended with scale, because having the need to scale our data, the need to look at larger volumes of data and more increasingly complicated models really required that we really understand exactly the path and the footprint of our data assets. And as we have reached out, our executive team actually had morning meetings every morning from March through probably July. And as we looked at those models, as we looked at the analytics that came out of this situation, it so highlighted the need for better data sets and for maybe updating our models, updating the way we look at data, updating the way we aggregate and flow through. Our big data strategy is completely being relooked at, and it's very much a perspective that we have an obligation to protect the data of our members and of our patients, and we have to, but we balance that by making that available in an industry that you never ever let personal health information out, and now suddenly we have to let it out to third-party applications as we look at our interoperability strategy and how we're going to be able to bring to bear all of the assets that we have. Fraud is a really big concern. It's certainly something that we're looking at. Our security teams are really doubling down, working overtime to ensure that we don't have the wrong information coming in. Things aren't getting pumped in from nefarious areas, and that we have good controls around our data. I think it was Dante that noted about governance and how important that is. I apologize if it wasn't you, Dante, but we've really taken a focus on governance as well, and making sure that we're putting the correct guardrails around our data, both what comes in, what goes out, how we relate with our vendors, how we relate with our customers, and then what we do with our information internally. So a lot of topics have come up, and truthfully, who thought data was going to be the takeaway from COVID-19? But it seems consistently that the need for better data, I think, has risen as kind of the main insight that we've gained from dealing with this concern.
Absolutely. And Morgan, I'm just going to pick on that momentarily. Now, I know from speaking with other healthcare professionals in the data analytics world that interoperability is really designed so that, patients' data can follow them everywhere. And there is that, obviously, on the backside, there's that increase of reporting that we've never seen before, both from federal and state level. So how have your teams dealt with that letting go of data? Because as you say, having personal patient data, you want to hold on to that. It feels very strange to be letting that go. So how have your teams managed that?
It is a really difficult thing for us to actually come to grips with the fact that we're just going to set it free. But what we've really had to do is look doubly hard at our authentication and our digital signatures and how we authenticate applications into our environments, how we release the information via APIs, how we can interact with these third-party organizations. And so we've taken a serious look at security. I think I mentioned that before, but really that's been one of the biggest things. How do we keep the data secure while still setting it free? How do we work with our partners to identify best practices? How do we work with the industry to identify what use cases to even anticipate? Because that is the biggest challenge, honestly, in healthcare interoperability today, is with third-party applications coming in directly to get member and patient data, we have to be able to have some idea of what use cases we'll be able to deliver that data in. And so, following those best case use cases across the industry and working with others and really collaborating, having collaborative conversations and very courageous conversations across the aisle with those who have been our competitors, but who now we all have this obligation to share out our information to our members and between each other. And it is very much a moment of just reevaluating the relationship, not only to our competitors and our systems, but really to the data itself and how they are to be understood and managed.
That's fantastic. Dante, how about you? So the original question, where are you on your journey to delivering real-time insights and analytics?
Well, real-time sounds easy, right? And I would say that it depends the project, it depends the line of business. It's not like the whole company. So I would say that it's hard, especially I was saying at the beginning of the technical debt, and that technical debt is reflected also on this kind of things. I mean, we just heard about APIs. So in order to have everything connected, APIs is a great solution. But in order to have the real time for either internal or external things, the main thing is have your systems ready for that streaming deployments rather than traditional ETLs or ELTs, right? So moving into that streaming process that gives you real-time analytics, real-time decision-making, real-time fraud detection, I would say that it's not an easy path, and I wouldn't say that we are there at all. It's a large path that we got to follow along with IT teams. This is not only about data analytics. This is something that has to do a lot with the architecture and technology overall. So the CIO, the CTO must be involved in this transition to actually achieve that digital experience, because I believe Morgan that said about the APIs, but really in order to achieve that digital experience, it's through leveraging your technology and the APIs for this, communication, internal and external. So once you have that clear, I would say that the data strategy must be clear from the very high executives, not only the technical people or the data analytics or data science team. So yeah, it's the response is we are not quite there.
Wonderful, thank you. And what you've done there, Dante, is you have started a really great chain that I want to carry on now. Of what advice do you give to someone who is just starting out on this road of delivering real-time insights and analytics? So, Krishna, I'm going to come to you first on this. What would you recommend to someone who was starting out on this journey as a place to start?
Yeah, I think when you take a step back and look at the data and analytics strategy, I think it is important for all of us to recognize, and especially those of us who work in companies that are not digitally native and have a technical debt, or as they call the sins of the past to build on, is it is important to have a simultaneous focus on near-term value creation from analytics and insights, and at the same time focusing around some of the core work of pivoting the architecture of data, the technology into a better footing to fully capitalize around whether it is analytic automation potential, advanced techniques like AI and ML, and full real-time insights where it is applicable. But that aspect of making sure that you're simultaneously focusing around taking those use cases and delivering value in the here and now, and at the same time, focusing around rebuilding the foundations where it is warranted, and having a clear architectural strategy around the organization of the data, management of the data, the governance, stewardship, and at the end of the day, making sure that the data supply chain for analytics and insights, if I can use that word, is as effective as it can be. A lot of times what I see is that organizations tend to have multi-year roadmaps and focus on long lead time execution. But if anything that the COVID-19 situation has told us is the business context and the situational context is fast moving. So in order to be able to sustain those kind of long range programs, you also need to balance that with a simultaneous focus on value creation in the insights. Now, what are the business problems and questions where insights and analytics can make a difference today? How do we use short-term tactics and other mechanisms to deliver that? At the same time, how do we pivot the data fabric of the company to a better future? So that kind of a two-speed focus would be the one advice I would give to anybody starting that journey today.
That's absolutely brilliant. And just before we move on to our final topic area, Scott, you started out by saying that you're fairly advanced in this journey. So is there anything you'd add on to Krishna's advice there for someone starting out?
So, I would pile on and simply say, understand where you are today from a maturity perspective as an organization. And I say that, in terms of tools and platforms and capabilities. Very often we're encumbered by, IT or our ability to bring up the sort of analysis and aggregation of data that we need. I think the other point along understanding oneself and where we are on these journeys is to ensure that we don't do harm. Right, I get very concerned as new data flows through that data is misused, right? Whether it be misused for purposes it's not intended, or whether it gets thrown into a model and people have not taken the sufficient time, let's say, to look at it from an ethical AI perspective, that we're not biasing customers. And so, I always like to caution that, understand where we are, understand the data is valuable, but then also have a very measured, practical plan around the proper use of that data. And I think that's critically important because in this time, right, people are rushing to get access to more data and to make decisions a little more rapidly. But haste makes waste, and it can also harm people. And so, it's very, very important to be self-inspective in terms of where each organization is, and then take very measured and careful sort of steps as we ingest this data and work with this data, particularly when it comes to real time and the sorts of decisions that we're making with this data flowing through the systems.
Brilliant, wise words indeed. Now, I want to take this last 15 minutes that we have together to really focus the conversation on kind of post-pandemic world and what that looks like for all of you. So the first question I'm going to put to you as a group is, how have you been accelerating your digitalization projects to help your organizations prepare for this post-pandemic world? Lax, I'll come to you first.
At Regions, we take a three-pronged approach. So I think one of the first ones is kind of, it needs to be top-down approach. So The business unit is bought in, so we don't start a project or a data product if the business unit is not involved in the data product. Second, I think people touched on it. I think Dante mentioned again, like we need to bring in like the technology team and tons of other people. So it's a collaborative effort. It's a team sport. So it's not just the data analytics team working on this one. Like it's the data analytics group, there's the IT organization, the digital organization, the business unit, all of them coming together and working. And that's another key reason why Agile kind of works really well in this space. But most importantly, one of the key methodology we apply, we call it the data products approach. So we think about all of these as data products. So everything, we think about it more end to end. So starting from what is going to be a source of data, how do we bring that data into our data lake? How do we do the ETL process? Or if it needs to be streaming, like how do we do that? Looking at all of that, then thinking about the data science portion of it, like how do we do advanced analytics? And then how do we get it to the end customer, be it a mobile platform, be it like a web platform, or maybe dashboards and stuff, like whatever it is, like more thinking about it end to end is another key aspect. So we look at all three of those things. And I think Scott mentioned a key thing, that's another big one, like the ethical use of AI. So with data and analytics, you get a lot of power, and with power comes responsibility. So I think it's extremely important to kind of keep that in mind, and then like how we are leveraging that data and how we are using it. That's going to be extremely important. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. And I love the idea of it being a team sport as well. It's always great to think of, because I think this conversation we've really kind of stayed talking about data analytics as a department. I know we kind of included the IT in that as well, but actually organization wide, it's definitely ethics and those sorts of considerations do need to be a lot wider. So Morgan, coming to you next, what does life look like in a post-pandemic world, and how have you been preparing for that?
Well, Locke's actually said exactly the right thing. We are actually looking at our data as products. So really transitioning to a product mindset. I think that Christian, you had mentioned as well, kind of the supply chain of data earlier, and both of those really sparked kind of where we're headed with our data and our analytics strategy at this moment is really the productization, the making sure that we think about it like a supply chain. Do we have the right data at the right place at the right time for the right care? How do we make that happen? What tools and procedures do we need? And so I really do love that you both brought that up, because I think that's going to be very key for as we move forward into the next phase of this, our new normal, I guess is our next normal. Really the thing that I think we're going to have more focus on than anything else is we are really focusing on eliminating our technical debt, and we actually have to justify any new technical debt with much more rigor than ever before, because that eats you up, that stops you. It's like throwing a huge pothole in the road and you just can't drive past it some days. And so focusing on the elimination of technical debt and the minimization of creation of that technical debt is another really important strategy going forward. And I think probably the biggest thing is really the aggregation of all of our data sources into better data pipelines, so that we have volume, velocity, and spatiotemporal data available for the right analytics to really serve our members in a better way.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, the key learnings that have come out of the last 6 months has just been incredible. The amount that we're now putting forward is fantastic. Scott, how about you? What does the world look like post-pandemic?
For us, it's going to continue. It's much like the data product. We treat each of our analytic capabilities as a unique piece of software, right? And so, I see, if anything, many organizations have struggled with, having the right tools, the right analytics available to them to gain insight. And so, for us, we're going to continue that strategy of building out different analytic capabilities. I think, for us and probably for the industry, we've seen more, standardized platforms and best practices, to adjust to this. And part of this for us will be looking for the next pandemic or the next crisis, right? These occur on our unfortunately will occur on a regular basis, whether it be financial or whether it be health, and so part of this is being ready. So part of it is building up those software assets that will understand that data on a regular basis. So I don't think things will change that much as we gear up to making sure that businesses can respond and we can respond as data is changing. And I think that'll be a big part of our investment in terms of those capabilities to monitor that data at scale and be ready on how to adjust and how to help, let's say, our customers adjust as things are changing. Because even though post-pandemic, right, I think this will continue to lag for some period of time as everyone readjusts to whatever that normal will look like.
Absolutely, and I think it's fair to say that people are adjusting at all different paces as well. I know here in the UK, we've got some people who are already back in offices. We've got some people who are still at home and intend to be for the next 12 to 6 months. So yeah, that's a really great point. Dante, heading over to you, post-pandemic world, what does that look like?
Okay, my dream will be, following the thought of, this data products end-to-end building blocks that all putting all together will be mature data fabrics in companies that allow this fast sharing through APIs. I mean, maybe this, I don't know if it's a dream, but I see that result as as this post-pandemic mature companies that, as was mentioned, a little bit of technical debt, a lot of technical debt was paid. The data-driven mindset was, promoted, and in the end, it's not just like one area of the company, but it's part of a culture, the data culture. It's not just a few persons doing some analysis. It's just the whole company and a data decision-driven mindset, leveraging technology. I would say that it's more democratization of the technologies and the information. That's how I look the post-pandemic analytics view.
Absolutely fantastic. Now, Krishna, to round us off, how about you?
I think for us, it is reflecting on what coming out of this will be things that is the new digital normal. If you look at our case, the important medicines, whether it is in cancer care, cardiovascular diseases, and immuno diseases, the way the patients experience the medicines is fundamentally different in a COVID setting where everybody is forced to be remote and socially distanced. So the impetus and the importance around digital experiences and data experiences to go along with it is increasingly important. Whether it is in our interactions with our patients, it is with the interactions with the physicians, healthcare professionals, and others. So we have to take a step back and reevaluate how do we make sure that as we come out of the pandemic and come to the new normal or the continuation of or the reimagination of a digitally new normal, that we adjust our digital and data strategies to go along with it. So that means that we need to have the effective capabilities to be able to conduct work in a remote capability, a remote setting, be able to connect with our customers a lot more directly, dynamically, in a personal fashion, and how do we make sure that internally the data and digital capabilities are positioned to be able to fully capitalize around both the opportunity as well as to overcome the challenges. So a lot of learnings coming out of this experience, which I think for those of us who are in the digital and data world, this has really given us a platform to push forward some of the necessary improvements that, as somebody pointed out before, were big topics of debate in the company, and now this becomes a necessity and not a topic for debate.
Fantastic. Now, as we are coming to our final few minutes here, I'm going to ask you to do something rather challenging. You all, as top 100 executives, have achieved fantastic things across your career. Now, I'm going to ask you in, say, a sentence or two, if you could go back and visit yourself 5 years ago, what would be the one piece of advice you would give yourself? Lax, I'm going to start with you.
I think, again, as I mentioned, like the data products approach is one of the things that I've learned in the last 5 years. So when we started the whole thing, we would do it and still lots of companies are facing that. They do amazing data science projects, amazing models, but then it doesn't get scaled, it doesn't get used. So applying that data products approach kind of really makes sure it gets used. So that's one thing I would say and suggest people.
Fantastic. Scott?
For me, probably it would have been to focus more on, what does a remote work environment look like? For us, we were very much a work from the office. And so, I don't know if we still have it right, but if we had spent time 5 years ago thinking about it, we would have been in a little bit better situation. So how more to nimbly work in a remote office environment is what I would have focused on.
Brilliant. Morgan?
That is a really difficult question, but I think that I would say, it really is. I would say that really a focus on understanding how we move to the cloud faster and better to make data more available in a more contextually cohesive manner. So that's really what I would probably go back and say, hey, learn a little bit more about that cloud thing. Don't just let the kids these days know about it. You need to really get out there and educate yourself and really understand how we can move our data to the cloud.
Krishna?
I think it is probably more a personal reflection as to be sensitive to how change affects people. And I think I made an earlier comment on the fact that this is putting people at the center and how they experience this new normal. How do we help people go through the change journeys and paying more attention to your own change journey, as well as to helping people fully realize their potential and be productive these kind of settings. I don't know how much priority all of us have paid in the past in our people strategies, but if I can go back 5 years, re-emphasize people strategy and help people to deal with these kind of situations.
Wow. And Dante?
It's a difficult question. I would say to me that the impact of data quality is bigger than that I used to think. A lot of good projects and smart people and nice technology, it's not fully deployed and fully achieved because of this problem of having confidence of the data, first of all, and second of all, mindset. It's for sure, mindset and culture is for sure something that will hinder to be successful. So maybe invest more time in culture, training, and showing people the benefits of these strategies to achieve more success in any project.
Absolutely wonderful. I always like to end with the hardest question because you've all warmed up by that point. Thank you all so much for joining us, and congratulations again on being in the top 100 global innovators in data analytics. It's been wonderful chatting with you, and I hope to catch up with you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We really hope you enjoyed that hour of content. I certainly did. I do adore working with these executives. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the platform and following our social page to be first in line for this fantastic content. Until next time, stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.